Hi, I'm Lindley Craig, and I'd like to welcome you to this video on building self-confidence with NLP. Today, in this particular video, we are going to talk about why it's so important to learn about building self-confidence, as well as what exactly self-confidence is and how we use our NLP skills to be able to build our self-confidence. Lastly, it's up to you to notice what you've learned in this video and to be able to review those kinds of learnings and take them into action into your own life after watching the video, of course. So why is it so important to learn about how to build your self-confidence? Well, first of all, it's about sway. And what I mean by this is your ability to influence other people. There was a study done at a university where they took a bunch of university students and they put them in through a series of examinations. And the unique part of this particular experiment was they asked the students, after completing the examination, to go back through the examination and determine which of the answers that they had a good confidence level that they were correct. So did they have confidence that they were correct, or did they not have confidence that they were correct? Now, very interestingly, most women scored very well on the examination, but scored very low in their confidence that they were right on each answer. Whereas in the men, they were actually overconfident because they were marking things that they were sure and confident that they had correct that were actually incorrect. Now, when they gathered these participants together, the people who had the overconfidence, the people who scored more often wrong, but were really sure that they were right, those are the people who swayed the rest of the group. Those were the leaders of the group. Those are the people who had influence over what the rest of the group did. Now that's really important to know because self-confidence is actually a measure of our success, more important than our competence and more important than our IQ. So having self-confidence is key and critical to our success in all areas of our lives. Another factor is our ability to flow. And what I mean by that is our ability to kind of get into a zone where we're using our skill sets to their highest level and having complete and utter focus on being able to use our skill set in those situations. Now, the flow aspect only occurs if you have confidence in your skill set. You can never achieve the flow and the focus on a skill set if you don't believe that you have the skill set to begin with. So flow is really important. That's where athletes, like Olympic athletes, are able to totally put themselves into a zone and achieve extraordinary things. And entrepreneurs do it as well. In fact, there's a lot of people in business and in relationships and in all areas of life, finance, that also get into this flow aspect, whether in their job or in their daily lives. They use their skill set and get into that. They have to have confidence to be able to do it first, though. And lastly, there's this idea about confusion. Like, what exactly is confidence? There's so many elements of what there can be involved in having self-confidence. Is it about self-esteem? Is it about a positive attitude? Is it about optimism? What specifically is it about? See, there's a lot of studies done about happiness and resilience, but there aren't a lot of studies about confidence because it's so multifaceted. To get started in our exploration of what self-confidence actually is, I'd like to challenge you to think about a person or people in your life that are really self-confident, that have that just that thing that when you look at them, they appear to you to be really self-confident. And I want you to take a moment by pausing the video and writing down about 5 to 10 things. And these are what we're looking for as characteristics of people who are self-confident. So that might be things like, they stand up straight, or it might be something about their physiology, their tone of voice. It could be something about the way they speak to people, or it could be about how they can easily sway people, influence people. It can be things that they do, or the way that they behave, or things that they say, or anything that you think of, that when you think of those people that are self-confident, what is it that really sets them apart, that makes you believe that they're so self-confident? What is it that they do? So go ahead and pause the video right now and take as much time as you need to come up with between 5 to 10 elements that are of real self-confidence. Go ahead and do that now. All right, you're finished, I hope. 5 to 10 things about characteristics of people who are really self-confident. Now again, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pause the video, because this time I want you to think about people in your life that are filled with self-doubt. So what is it that when you look at them, that they appear to be people that are filled with self-doubt, that they're unsure of themselves, that they're not quite as confident as other people. In fact, they might not have any confidence at all in themselves. So what are those characteristics of those people? So again, take a little time now, as much time as you need. Pause the video and come up between 5 to 10 of these characteristics of people with self-doubt. All right. Now that we've looked at both self-confidence and self-doubt, let's look at what it is that really makes people self-confident. Some of these things might be on your list, and some of them probably aren't. So the first one actually has to do with our DNA. So you might not have noticed somebody's DNA on your list, but that's okay. It's one of the things that actually is very interesting, because it's about our serotonin transporter gene. And so in a serotonin transporter gene, this is the gene that basically provides serotonin to our system. Now, serotonin is an amazingly important neurochemical for confidence. So the transporter gene tells us whether or not we'll be really confident or not so confident. So one of those aspects is that the serotonin gene and transporter gene could be 2 short strands. It could be 1 long strand and 1 short strand, or 2 long strands. Now, it's very, very rare and very, very unusual to have the 2 short strands. And the 2 short strands basically mean that you are more susceptible to depression and anxiety. So as I said, it was very rare, but it's very interesting to also understand that we have the ability to turn on and turn off our genes by using our plasticity of our brain. See, we don't have to utilize all of our genes that we have. We can basically inhibit them, or we can excite them depending on how we use our brain. So just because you might be one of those very rare few that have the 2 smaller ones, you might never know, because of the fact that your environment and the way you lead your life doesn't, promote activating those 2 smaller strands. So a long strand and a short strand just basically means you sort of are somewhere in between. And then 2 long strands, of course, means that you have the ability to have lots of serotonin in your system, hence having an ability to have more confidence in your life more than others. So obviously, if you had those 2, we would want to excite those. We would want to activate them so that we would have as much confidence as we need. Now, getting more specifically into neurotransmitters, serotonin is one of the best neurotransmitters we have for self-confidence. So serotonin actually helps our prefrontal cortex talk and communicate with our amygdala. And our amygdala is the area of our fear center. It's the primitive area of our brains where we have our fight and our flight mode. And it's also the area of our fears and our doubt that we have. So when serotonin levels are really good, it's basically acting as the calming mechanism to the amygdala. So it allows us to make really great decisions. It calms the amygdala, it calms our fears, it calms the ability or our sense to be able to flee or to fight something. All right, so one of the other neurochemicals that's really good for confidence as well as happiness is oxytocin. So oxytocin gets activated in our system through sex, through hugs, and through exercise. So serotonin also gets activated through exercise. So exercise actually is one of the key components of self-confidence. So even though it might sound really silly, to be able to keep your serotonin and your oxytocin flowing, exercise is really good, as well as hugs. So you want to keep oxytocin and that serotonin flowing as much as you possibly can. So the last one is dopamine. And dopamine is that neurochemical that's associated with the warrior or the worrier. So if you worry a lot about things that might happen in the future, you have this thing about the fact that you're lacking dopamine in your system to be able to calm your fears about the future and stop that worrying. Whereas people with really good levels of dopamine have more of a warrior sense where they want to go exploring, they want creativity, they want curiosity. They want all of those kinds of things in their lives. So dopamine helps us to get into that groove. And of course, that's going to help self-confidence. Because if your creativity and your exploration and your confidence are all going, you're on that way. You're on your way to developing really fantastic self-confidence. All right, so let's look at another one. One of the parts of the research that was done on self-confidence really found out that it's a product of our choices, of our actions that we take on a daily basis. So if we have a choice between one thing and another thing, then making a choice, deciding, and then dealing with the consequences of whatever that choice was, whether it's a good consequence or a bad consequence, that's really what developing self-confidence is all about. Now, not making a choice is also making a choice. But not making a choice, of course, leads you more to self-doubt rather than to self-confidence. Another one that's very interesting about building self-confidence is that it comes from hard work and persistence. So when we look at people who have really great levels of self-confidence, it's that they're going out, they're doing the work, and that they have persistence in overcoming challenges, of overcoming obstacles, and they really want to get to their outcome. So it's really important that you have that mindset of being a hard worker and being persistent when you're trying to develop your self-confidence. So any kind of area of your life, having that discipline of hard work and persistence really helps to develop your self-confidence. Another thing is that people that are self-confident have this ability to be okay with failing. So they can risk doing something and be able to, and knowing that they could fail, and they're okay with that. People who are more self-doubt oriented, they're not okay with risk at all. If they're not sure that they can do it, then they don't want to have anything to do with it, really. That's somebody who's more in that self-doubt mode. So I can assume so far that through the examples of what I've used in the video about self-confidence, you probably have heard a lot of action orientation. So that is a key to self-confidence. People who have self-esteem, that believe in themselves, it's a thinking process of self-esteem. They think good things about themselves. But the difference between somebody who has self-esteem and self-confidence is the person who has self-confidence not only thinks that they can achieve something, they actually go out and do it. So action is the key that makes the difference between somebody who just has a good measure of self-esteem versus somebody who has really good measure of self-confidence. Now, another thing that's very interesting about people with self-confidence is they have a comfort level with their own individual uniqueness. Now, when I was growing up, I grew up as a tomboy, as we called it in the United States. So a tomboy was somebody, a girl who, didn't wear dresses, that kind of played around the mud and went and, fished and found frogs in streams and played on the jungle gyms and, got dirty. And so I grew up like that because my father had one last chance at a boy, and unfortunately, I was a girl. So when I grew up, I was kind of more growing up more as a sort of sub kind of guy. My father's last chance for a guy. So I learned to sort of hunt and fish and do all sorts of things that normal girls my age weren't doing as they grew up. Now, the other thing that I had as I was growing up in my environment was the fact that my father did some quite unique things. When I was growing up, he did things like, tell me to go off and drive this beat up pickup truck over to this little local store to pick up something. And as I'm driving away, my father yells to me, "Oh, it doesn't have any brakes." "What do you mean it doesn't have any brakes?" And I yelled back, "How am I meant to stop?" And he said, "Don't drive so fast." And I'm thinking to myself, that's not going to help, Dad, because I got to get to the store and I got to park the car. And he said to me, as I'm still moving my way down, of course, because I can't stop, and he yells at me, "When you get to the parking lot, just put it in neutral and turn it off and it'll come to a stop." And I thought, okay, got that one solved. And then he said, and if you really need to stop in an emergency, just hit a tree. Okay, sure, why not, Dad? Thanks. So he put us in situations as we were growing up as kids that really challenged us to be able to have to think for ourselves, have to modify on the fly, and really put ourselves into situations where we were probably going to make a lot of mistakes. And boy, oh boy, did I. And that's another key to confidence, is that you're willing and able to make mistakes and then learn from them. All right. So one of the other elements or characteristics of people with good self-confidence is they're not all that concerned about what other people think. Now, in my in my coaching, I help people to understand my phrase for this, which is other people's stuff. And so other people's stuff are really none of your business. So if you have a problem with other people's opinions about you, you kind of have to put it into the other people's stuff category. They have all sorts of programs that have gone on in their life. They've been raised in a certain way. They have all sorts of things that are going on in their own little brains. And you can't really be in charge of how they create meaning, how they do their programs, how they were raised. You don't have any control over any of those things. So other people's stuff is really just that. It's just their stuff. And so what I've really learned, especially coming through NLP, is that other people's stuff doesn't have to worry me at all. So I'm actually quite good with not caring about what other people think. So another thing that really sets people with self-confidence apart is decisiveness. They have the ability to not only make choices, but make them quickly and stick with them and go into action mode. People that are filled with self-doubt, they are the ones who cannot decide on something very quickly. And they take a lot of time to research things. Now, unfortunately, especially in this day and age, corporations require the ability for us to think quickly and decisively, to make decisions and be able to move forward. So even if you get it wrong, it's really important that you fail fast, fail quickly, and get back into a positive plan, another plan that's going to help you succeed. So decisiveness is really key. Another key characteristic of people with self-confidence is their ability to have an environment that surrounds them that is conducive to self-confidence. So they hang out with people who are self-confident. They utilize their environment and their entire way that they've been brought up, most likely somewhat similar to mine, where they were challenged a lot during growing up. And this also leads into another characteristic of self-confidence is competitiveness. So children that have grown up with a competitive sport have a tendency to be more self-confident than children that aren't. So I grew up as a member of a swim team. So not only did I have individual medals where I can be confident of my performance individually, I could also be part of a team, and our team could win as the result of all of our individual efforts. So that was actually really good for me as I grew up, because of course I had all those medals hanging around my room. And that was, again, one of those things that I can look at and say, yes, I did that. And that's part of that self-confidence. Another thing is that self-confident people have a tendency to use body language quite regularly. So that, they have gestures, they're open, they have, a upright stance, thrown back shoulders, their head's upright, they're looking up. And they don't cower themselves. They don't go inside themselves. They don't try to hide from other people. So self-confident people are much more expressive. And it's part of that reason is because of the fact that they don't really care what other people think. Last one, their voice tone. So people with self-confidence have a tendency to have lower voice tones than people who don't. So if you naturally have a high voice tone, practice using lower voice tones, because you'll come across as more confident when you speak. All right, so those are some of the characteristics of self-confident people. Now, I have uploaded all this information onto a PDF for you to download so that you can have the characteristics of self-confidence as well as people who have self-doubt. In addition, I've also included things in there about definitions of other kinds of terms, other kinds of words that we use to describe self-confidence, but that aren't really self-confidence. So for example, I was talking earlier about self-esteem and how self-esteem is, a person who says, I feel good about myself, I'm a good person. But again, they have an internal dialogue that's based on that. And they have internal feelings that's based on the fact that they feel good about themselves. They think they're a good person. But again, the difference between self-confidence is the thinking versus the action. And then we have people that are optimistic. So everything's going to work out. And they're optimistic. But again, they're looking at it as a aspect of something that is not action oriented. Again, it's a thinking base. So they look for opportunity in small challenges. They go out for gratitude. Those are the kinds of things that optimism and optimistic people do. And self-compassion. People say, I treat myself like I treat others. Now, all of these elements can be part of self-confidence. But again, self-compassion isn't necessarily self-confidence. It can be part of it, but not a definition of it. So basically with this is that we're looking at the ability to put ourselves into a shared position. So if we have a failure, we don't look at it as an individual thing. We look at it as a human trait. Like everybody fails at some point in time. So self-compassion, we just put ourselves into a different frame where we frame it into a universal experience rather than something that we individually do all of the time. And self-efficacy is another one. So self-efficacy is one of those things where we're just like, just do it, just get it done, go out and get it done. And it's our belief in our ability to succeed. And with self-efficacy, we have an ability to recover from stuff, from setbacks really easily. And we have that thing about being challenged to conquer stuff. But again, the difference is that a thought process internally versus an action externally. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so this is a self-confidence continuum. So on one hand of this continuum, we have self-doubt. In the middle, we have self-confidence. And at the end, we have overconfidence. So where do you think you should fall in this continuum? Where do you think you should fall? Well, the answer to that question, strangely enough, is falling on the side of overconfidence. And the reason for this is because of the fact that studies have shown that people that are slightly overconfident are the ones who succeed the most. So in our picture here, we have this group of army guys, and it reminds me of this story about the Australian Armed Forces and Special Forces. And they have a saying in the Special Forces that goes something like this: I've never done it, and I'm bound to be good at it. So they have this phrase that goes along with their unit that is all about overconfidence. I've never tried it, but I'm bound to be good at it. Now, that's pretty overconfident. Now, here's the difference between that being something negative versus being something positive. Think about what it takes to be able to get into special forces in any military in the world. These men and women have to do an enormous amount of stuff to be able to get there. They have had to try and fail a lot of things to be able to get into this elite group. They have had to have an enormous number of experiences where they have been challenged both mentally and physically in thousands of different ways. So it's not that their overconfidence isn't based on anything. It's based on a vast amount of experience, which allows them to be able to say, I've never done it, but I'm bound to be good at it, because they know that they have been so good at all sorts of other things. Now, if we look at the opposite end of the spectrum, self-doubt. Self-doubt is people that are lacking an immense amount of confidence. But I bet you didn't know that this can also come out in behavior as an aggression or hyperactivity in people. So people that lack self-confidence can have this other kind of behavior where it sort of seems that they have confidence, but it's not really confidence. It's this hyperactivity and aggression because of the fact that they do not feel good about themselves, that they lack that confidence. And a lot of that can be helped by utilizing the things that I was talking about before. You know, having challenges and being able to make mistakes and being able to learn from those mistakes. Those are the kinds of things that help people that have self-doubt move closer to self-confidence. And of course, the people who are self-confident. You know, it's an emotional as well as a cognition and put into action kind of thing. So we do tasks, we self-assess, and then we make adjustments to the next action that we're going to take. And the self-assessment that we're doing here is a realistic self-assessment. We're not being hard on ourselves. We're just saying, hey, we could have done that better, or hey, nice job, let's get going on the next thing. So it's really about this action, reflection, action, and continuation of that particular cycle. Now, what's actually also very interesting is there's two areas in the middle that are key to kind of understanding a little bit more about self-confidence. So people who are in this self-confident area and sort of halfway between self-confidence and this overconfident military group, these people have a tendency potentially to be narcissistic. So they appear to be very confident. They appear to have that little bit of overconfidence. But the fact is that it's not based on anything substantial. It's not based on experience. It's based on the fact that they model the behavior of people who have self-confidence. So they might talk right. They might have the body posture right. They might do stuff, but they don't actually have what it takes to be really self-confident. They're really self-doubtful inside, but exterior-wise, they show this self-confidence. And on the other hand, you have the people from self-confidence to self-doubt. You have the people in the middle there that could be what we call people who have a fraud syndrome or an imposter syndrome. So these people actually do have the skill set. They do have the experience. They do have all of the things that would normally make somebody self-confident, but they're riddled with self-doubt. So it might be their serotonin levels. It might be their oxytocin, all sorts of neurochemicals. It might be, two short strands. I don't know what it is for each individual. But they have this thing inside of them that believes that they're being a fraud to people. And when in all actuality, they do have the experience. They do have the action orientation to be able to be confident. They just have things holding them back. Now, a lot of that is negative internal dialogue. So let's look at how NLP can help with building self-confidence. So one of the ways is that we have all this internal negative dialogue and there's these bad negative feelings that we have about ourselves. We have guilt, we have fear, we have all this judgment, we have all of this stuff that's going on inside of us. And so one of the things that NLP can do is help you in this area by this little technique we call cancel erase. All right? So cancel erase basically means when we have all that negative stuff going inside our mind, we kind of want to go cancel erase and we want to kind of scrub it out, like we're erasing a chalkboard or a whiteboard or something like that. We kind of want to erase it from our minds. And then we want to ask the question, what do we want instead? What do we want instead of all of this negative stuff inside of our head? What do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? What goal are we going for? What do we want instead? So when I was first came to the country that I live in, Singapore, there was a Cantonese word used in this incident that happened with me. So I got into a taxi with somebody and I said, you need to put your seatbelt on or we're getting a car accident. And the gentleman I was traveling with and the taxi driver simultaneously say the word "choi." Now, I know for Cantonese people, I might not be pronouncing that perfectly well, but "choi" was the word I heard. And so "choi" is this word which means the same thing. It means that we're canceling out this future expectation of negative stuff. We're making it go away. And some people say, you got to say it 3 times or whatever. I just say it once. And it became such a thing with me that I said it so many times to people around me, to myself, to everyone, that now my entire family says it. My 75-year-old father says "choi" to people who he's in conversation with who say something negative. He's "choi." And it's like, God, cancel, erase that out of your system. It's very interesting. So if you have these little techniques, you can cancel and erase the stuff that's going on inside of your head, and you can start creating a new program, a new pattern for yourself that allows you to think a negative thought for a second and then instantaneously go into an outcome that you actually want. So that's the first tip about how to get self-confident, because basically this negative stuff is going to hold you back from having that self-confidence that you need. All right, let's look at another one. Now, this one's quite interesting because it has to do with that tone of voice. So people with self-doubt, when they speak, they have a tendency to raise their voice at the end of a sentence. So they'll say things like, I have a really good idea for our proposal. And so they'll say it like at the end by raising their voice instead of keeping it level or lowering the tone at the end of the sentence. Now listen to it again, and then I'm going to say that phrase again, except for this time I'm going to say it like I normally would, right? So I have a really good idea for our proposal. And then if I was to say it like I normally do, I have a really good idea for our proposal. So that's much more flat, or just maybe a little bit lower at the end. Do you hear the difference of what's going on? Naturally, when we ask questions, we raise the tone at the end. Do you want a sandwich? We're raising the tone when we ask questions. So when people have self-doubt, they naturally raise their tone because they're unsure of what they're suggesting. So they naturally raise it. And here's the thing, they don't automatically know that they are doing it, but people who listen to them can hear it. And they might not know that they hear it, but they hear it as a question instead of a statement. And so it's really important that you practice when you're saying things in a meeting or you're saying things to somebody in your family, when you're trying to get your point across, that you're saying it in a flat tone instead of raising your tone at the end. All right, so that's something else that you can practice. And here's a third one. So this idea of kaizen, it's a Japanese word that kind of means constant and never-ending improvement. You want to stretch outside your comfort zone. And you want to do that by taking small steps outside of that comfort zone every day. So when you're doing something and you ask yourself, do I feel a little bit uneasy here? Or do I feel a little bit uncomfortable here? This doesn't feel so good, right? Yeah, that's it. You're in it. You're in that outside comfort zone kind of thing. If you can ask the question, do I feel uneasy about this? And you go, no, I feel perfectly fine about this. Then you're not there. You're still in your comfort zone. Okay? So we want to make sure that you're stretching yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone by saying and asking yourself, do I feel comfortable? Do I feel uneasy? Do I feel like this is an issue? So every time we stretch ourselves outside our comfort zone grows. And so we get used to doing more things. You remember, my father and the brakes in the car? So my father then escalated the entire car experience by taking myself and my sisters into a parking lot in the middle of winter in a mall when all the mall was closed. So there's this empty parking lot with all this snow everywhere. And he would take the car and he would drive really fast, and then he would put the car into a 360 spin and tell us to get out of it. That's how we learned how to drive in the snow, by my father putting us into terror situations that we had to get out of, right? So that's stretching outside our comfort zone. Now, I tell you, when I actually got into that situation later, I didn't panic. I knew exactly what to do. Now, I still ended up in the hospital because when I got out of the 360, unfortunately, I hit a big giant pole and bashed my head up against the window. But that's not really the point. The point is I actually could have been in a lot more danger and hurt a lot more seriously had I not gone through that experience with my father. And I've driven in snow many times since then and have never had a problem. Even when the car started to kind of spin a little bit, I knew exactly what to do to make sure that I didn't go wheeling down the road. Now, it's amazing that when you stretch yourself outside your comfort zone gets bigger and bigger. So we want to keep doing that. We want to have that Kaizen in our life, constant and never-ending improvement. Just little steps, a little step every day, and your comfort zone will grow and grow and grow. So those are the 3 little hints that I have for you. You can say joy, cancel, erase when all that negative stuff is inside your head. And make sure that you always end it with, what do I want instead? And then the second one, being able to not raise your voice at the end of a sentence, but to keep it the same or lower it. So you're really coming across as saying a statement rather than a question. And number 3, of course, stretching outside your comfort zone. Now, you don't have to practice all of these. In fact, I would suggest that you just pick one and practice that one. Remember, there's that little PDF that is at the bottom of the page here that you can download and print for yourself to help you to understand the characteristics of self-confidence and how to be able to build it, because there's some hints in there as well. So that's it for me. Go out and exercise, get a hug, do one of those 3 things, and we'll see you the next time in the next video.